All right, and welcome to section 10.7. So in this section, we are learning to deal with negative square roots. Okay, we have been saying on and on and on that you can take the square root of a negative number, but lo and behold, we're going to be told actually we can. So what we've got is this magic thing called the square root of -1 is equal to I. All right, so anytime you see a negative number, you have to pull an I out. Okay, so -1 is equal to the square root of, or I squared. So if you ever have I squared, you need to simplify it to be -1. Replace I squared with -1. Anything more than I squared, you can simplify. So for our example, you might have the square root of -9. I would recommend rewriting it as the square root of -1 times the square root of 9. What's the square root of -1? I. What's the square root of 9 is 3. And mathematically, we like writing it as 3i. Okay, we like the I on the back end. Through this section, we are going to continue to do everything that we have done with radicals, but we're just going to do it with an I. So for example, here you would have 9 plus 2i minus 7 plus 6i. First thing you have to do is get rid of the parentheses. So you get 9 plus 2i minus 7 minus 6i. Okay, here again, don't forget to distribute that negative. Okay, you combine like terms, so 9 minus 7 is 2. And then you have 2i minus 6i, which becomes -4i. Here we go again. We get to distribute. So you got -2i times -3, which gives you a positive 6i. And then you have -2 times 4i. So that becomes minus 8i squared. And remember, back over here, I squared is equal to -1. So we have to simplify that. So we're going to write it as 6i minus 8 times -1. So you get a negative and a negative, and that makes a positive. So you've got 6i plus 8, or 8 plus 6i. Doesn't matter which way you write them. Typically, we would put the numbers before the i's, but they're both correct. All right, the other thing we can do is FOIL. So with I, so I have 16 times 2, 16 times that. So 16 times 2 is 32 minus 16 times 3, which is minus 48i. Now I have 9i times 2, which gives me plus 18i. And then 9 times 3, which gives me minus 27i squared. Okay, I'm going to combine my like terms. So I'll have 32 minus 20i minus 27i squared. Again, I have to replace the the I squared with -1. So I'm going to have 32 minus 20i, or minus 27 times -1, which becomes negative and negative makes positive. So now I have 32 plus 27, which would give me 59 minus 20i. So when you FOIL with i's, you should never have more than 2 terms, okay? Because once again, you have those I squareds. Here, again, what's wrong with this? Well, if I rewrote it as that, can you tell me what's wrong with it now? I've got a radical in the denominator. How do I get rid of the radical? So all I have to do is multiply the top and the bottom by I. Okay, so now I get 7i over 3, oops, I don't need that, I squared. Okay, and then I got to replace the I squared with -1, so I have 7i over 3 times -1. Okay, and so my final answer I can write it as negative 7i over 3. I can write it as 7i over negative 3. Or I can put that negative out front and write 7i over 3. All three of those are the same, doesn't matter, but I no longer have a radical down in the denominator. So I always have to get rid of all i's, because i's are a radical. All right, last one. Here we go. We've done these again with radicals. This is, and we do it the exact same. Remember, we're going to write 5 and 6i, but because that's a minus, I need to do a plus. So we got to rationalize it. Okay, so 5 times 9i gives me 45i. And 9 times 6 gives me 54i squared. Over 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 6 is 30i. 6 times 5 is minus 30i. And then I have minus 6 times 6, which is 36i squared. Those cancel. So now I have 45i plus 54i squared over 25 minus 36i squared. Okay, again, I have to replace the I squareds with -1. So now I'm going to have 45i plus 54 times -1 over 25 minus 36 times -1. And that becomes a plus and a plus. So therefore, I have 45i minus 54 over 25 plus 36, which gives me 61. Okay, and then what you would need to do is check to see if those three could simplify, if they had anything in common, but they don't, so you should be all good. Email me if you have any questions or ask me in class.